Unmasking what's behind the real anti-bullying programs. Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Matt Barber, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. Matt, we've heard a lot about these anti-bullying programs, and obviously none of us are in favor of bullying. Bullying should not be done, obviously, for any reason. But sometimes what's happening under these so-called anti-bullying programs is really a radical, leftist, sexual anarchist agenda. Mm-hmm. And that was revealed recently when Dan Savage spoke at a school and said some shocking things to these students. And really what ultimately I think happens is you see where the real bullying is coming from. And it's coming from those that are pushing this agenda.
Yeah, we've often said those who claim to be fighting hate and the proponents of tolerance and diversity are the most hateful, intolerant among us. Dan Savage is the face of leftist hate, of bullying. You mentioned he said something shocking. He does that for a living. You know, there used to be a time when we arrested middle-aged men who got their jollies talking dirty to children. Well, Dan Savage does that for a living. He has a show on MTV now. In this day and age, they get a show, they get a syndicated column. He speaks just smut, I mean filthy, but this time he took it a step further. He was speaking at the National High School Journalism Convention, hosted jointly by the Journalism Education Association, the National Scholastic Press Association. About a couple thousand kids in the room. He launched into a diatribe, an anti-Christian, bigoted diatribe, saying that the Bible was full of bull, expletive, and just berating Christianity and Christians. Hundreds of these students stood up and just started walking out because they were so offensive. The video shows some of these young girls walking out. You know, these are high school kids, freshmen, some of them, walking out with tears streaming down their face. And then he rather than stopping, he took the opportunity at that point to say, when they start getting pushback, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he talked about once they start getting pushback, they turn into pansy blanks and started cussing out these kids and calling them names. Yeah. And so the proponent, the anti-bullying, the face of anti-bullying from his stage revealed himself as what we've said he is all along. He's just a big middle-aged bully picking on kids.
It's really reverse bullying. He's the founder of It Gets Better. He was hired to speak at this anti-bullying conference at the National High School Journalism Conference. And this is in part what he said, and I'm quoting. I won't say everything that he said, obviously, because it would be banned by the FCC.
That's right.
But it says, people often point out, he says, they can't help with anti-bullying because it says it right there in Leviticus. It says it right there in Timothy. It says it right there in Romans that being gay is a problem. We can learn to ignore the bull blank in the Bible about gay people. And so that's what he said. It's shocking that he would get up in front of these individuals and he would just simply trash the scriptures for what it says and insult the majority of people that are there. And then when these students are offended by this, he then berates them even further.
Starts calling them names.
Puts insult. Yeah, no. So what he's doing, it's so ironic because he's talking about anti-bullying, and what he's doing is he is calling them names, which is bullying.
Yeah. This guy is a 47-year-old self-identified homosexual who advocates publicly. He advocates what he calls non-monogamy. He advocates having the occasional three-way tryst. This is a guy who's a sex columnist who MTV has given a platform to reach out to our children to put this poison in their minds. But here he is, of course, going down the liberal talking points. He said that the Bible is, quote, a radically pro-slavery document. That is a long discredited lie. That's just simply a lie. The Bible talks about how to be content in whatever situation you're in. The Bible is not pro-slavery. And certainly, Christ was not pro-slavery in the New Testament, and he's berating Christianity here.
Well, one of the teachers there was in attendance. His name was Rick Tuttle, and he brought his students from Sutter Union High School in Southern California, he said, for the purpose of hearing remarks about how to prevent bullying. And obviously, that's a legitimate thing to do. He says what his students experienced left him extremely upset. And he says, quote, I thought that there was value in going to this conference, but this speech, speaking about Dan Savage, I thought was going to be about anti-bullying, and what we got was a vulgar, profanity-laced attack on Christians.
Yeah.
He told Fox and Friends recently, he says, "It's my responsibility to protect all students from being bullied, and I inadvertently or unwittingly took them to a place where many were highly offended to the point that they wanted to leave, so they took a stand, and you know what? That is what we teach the kids to do when they're being bullied, to walk away, and that's what they did. And when they got outside the convention center, he was basically still lobbing insults at them."
Yeah, and he hasn't let up since. He refuses to apologize for the filth that he spewed about the Bible, and it's a fundamental mischaracterization of the Bible, of course, when he starts talking about, in Romans, what it says about Scripture. Throughout Scripture, yes, the Bible identifies homosexual behavior as sin, just as it does a litany of other sexual sins. Anything outside of the bonds of marriage between a man and a woman, any sexual activity outside of that is clearly biblical. That is sin according to the Bible. So what it amounts to here is Dan Savage. He knows it's not bullying. He knows that kids aren't using the Bible to really bully kids. What the Bible teaches is speaking God's truth in love. But to those who hate what God says about sexual morality, to them, they like to spin that, twist that, people like Dan Savage, and say that is bullying. Essentially, what these people want to do, as we've talked about frequently, is have religious cleansing through any public forum to get rid of the biblical model of human sexuality.
Well, and here's what is the problem with these anti-bullying laws. We are not in favor, no reasonable, rational person would be in favor of having one person bullied for any reason, whatever that reason is. But all people are made in the image of God, no matter whether you agree with them, no matter whether they're practicing one act or whether they're doing some kind of destructive behavior or whatever they're doing. They're all still made in the image of God, and we need to respect them. That doesn't mean that we agree with different actions or behavior. But what he has done here, and what I think this really unmasks, is what ultimately is behind some of these anti-bullying laws. It is reverse bullying. It is the opportunity to use a club to people who are Christians or have moral convictions with regards to homosexuality or any kind of deviation outside of normal sexuality. Anybody who believes that sexuality outside of normal sexuality with a man and a woman in a husband and wife relationship will ultimately be the target of bullying. They'll be ridiculed, they'll be attacked, they'll be punished, they'll be sent to the principal's office, they'll be disciplined, they'll be suspended. They'll be ultimately forced to accept that agenda. And that's exactly what was unmasked here with Dan Savage.
It's absolutely these anti-bullying laws, as pushed by groups like the Human Rights Campaign, people like Dan Savage. They are a Trojan horse in order to get every demand of the radical homosexual activist agenda into our public schools. These are tools that they use for indoctrination. And we know this to be the case because a number of conservatives have said, hey, wait a minute, your bullying laws segregate. They discriminate against other classes of kids who are bullies by specifically and only focusing on so-called LGBT kids, kids who identify based on these sexual behaviors. We have said, let's have a general anti-bullying law that covers all children, that protects all kids, Christians, LGBT, heavy-set kids that wear glasses, kids with freckles, all kids. They won't do it because this is a tool that they are using in order to try to further their radical agenda and indoctrinate children. Therefore, anybody who disagrees with them is the bully, becomes the bully. That's what these anti-bullying laws and campaigns like the It Gets Better campaign that Dan Savage is pushing, that's the true motive behind them.
It is. So we're going to keep following this, but also when you find out that you have one of these laws coming in your state or your local area, give Liberty Counsel a call. Certainly this is also being pushed on the federal level by the current administration. Give Liberty Counsel a call. We have a lot of resources, and one of the resources is from a world-renowned expert, Dr. Judith Reisman, called Sexual Sabotage. It's a book that you ought to read. It gives the foundation and the history for a lot of these things that we're seeing today with regards to sexual anarchy and the sexual agenda that's taking place, going all the way back to Alfred Kinsey. This is a fascinating book. It's one that will ultimately reveal to you a lot of information that you probably didn't know. It's one that'll probably make your blood boil as well. I would encourage you to read it, Sexual Sabotage by Dr. Judith Reisman. Go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org. You can sign up for the Liberator and the Liberty Alert as well at lc.org.